Okay, Assalamualaikum and welcome back to Adfim Women's Summit 2022. Well, we have a lineup of 5 extraordinary speakers to discuss the topic titled Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. So allow me to introduce our moderator for today. We have Ms. Firoz Abdul Hamid. Well, with over 33 years of experience in the capacity of an advisor to public and private sector on issues ranging from strategy, transformation, innovation, communications, reputation management, crisis management, and communications, amongst others, Firoz obtained 2 degrees from Imperial College of Science and Technology of London, and she also qualified chartered engineer in the United Kingdom. She also received her MBA from Imperial College of London. Firoz started her career as a chartered civil engineer by managing multi-million-dollar complex, large-scale international construction, engineering and developmental projects in Malaysia and in the UK. She has since moved on and advised in renewable energy, led notable projects in the financial industry, advising corporate strategy, transformation, expansion, and communications before serving the office of the former Chief Secretary to the Government of Malaysia, Head of Public Service. In the public sector, she was involved in transformation, innovation, strategy, communications management, and public service delivery and coaching for senior public officials. She has also coached and trained C-suites and boards levels and led branding of country, cities, and township projects, and also created branding and marketing strategies for new image of countries, companies, institutions, initiatives, products, and markets. Amongst the many things she does, she also currently a consultant to the executive chairman and MD of Top Glove Group. As for the 5 panelists, panelist number 1, we have Tan Sri Dr. Jamila Mahmud, former Special Advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia on Public Health. Tan Sri Dr. Jamila is a medical professional with more than 2 decades experience managing crises in health, disasters, and conflict settings. She is currently Professor and Director of the newly established Sunway Center for Planetary Health in Malaysia. She was the Special Advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia on Public Health from April 2020 to August 2021. She is also a member of the Government of Malaysia's Economic Action Council and Climate Action Council. Her previous appointments include the Under-Secretary General for Partnerships at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, IFRC, Chief of the World Humanitarian Summit Secretariat at the United Nations, and Chief of the Humanitarian Response Branch at UNFPA. She is the founder of Mercy Malaysia, a Southern-based international humanitarian organization. Well, we have second panelist is Puan Khatijah Iskandar, Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Agrobank. Puan Khatijah Iskandar has more than 25 years of experience in both conventional and Islamic banking. She started her career at RHB Group for more than 10 years before expanding her career in various leadership roles in other commercial banks and developed financial institutions, FDIs. She was Head of Risk Management at Al Khair International Islamic Bank and Head of Islamic Credit at Hong Leong Islamic Bank. She was a Senior Vice President, Credit Risk at Bank Rakyat before joining Agrobank as Chief Risk Officer in 2017. She is currently the Deputy President or Chief Executive Officer of Agrobank, a leading DFI in Malaysia specializing in agriculture and food industry. She is a Chartered Professional in Islamic Finance, CPIF, Certified Credit Professional, CCP, and an accredited IBFIM trainer in Islamic Risk Management, Islamic Business Financing, and Islamic Banking Operation. She holds a degree in accounting from University of Denver, Colorado. She was listed as one of the most influential women in Islamic business and finance by Women Report in 2020 and 2021. Well, now we move on to the third panelist. We have Encik Azizi Mustafa. He is the Head Development Financing from MIDF. Encik Azizi is the head of the Development Finance of MIDF. The business is involved in the development of entrepreneurs in Malaysia, especially SMEs, through a provision of financing and business advisory. An engineer by qualification, Azizi has experience in the manufacturing, banking, and insurance sectors in both renowned multinational and local conglomerates such as AMD USA, Comac USA, Citibank Malaysia, Kuwait Finance House, and Petronas throughout his 33 years career. He has worked in various fields including quality engineering, engineering audit, human resources, public relations and communications, administrations, and corporate services prior to his current role managing MIDF's development finance business. And we have fourth panelist is Mr. Jason Leong, co-founder and advisor, Better Dads Malaysia. Mr. Jason Leong has a Bachelor of Law degree with honors and is currently the Chief Executive Officer of SIP Advisory Sdn Berhad, which provides professional advisory services on reputation management, strategic communications, government relations, and political analysis to Fortune 500 companies with businesses in Malaysia as well as prominent local companies. Jason worked as a banker in the HSBC Hong Kong for 6 years and thereafter served over 8 years as an external consultant, advisor on policy matters to the mayors of the city of Atlanta, Georgia, and the city of Omaha, Nebraska, and won Outstanding Service Awards from the cities of Atlanta. He also is the board of LPPKN and the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development, KPWKM, and working on family-related policies and initiatives. And last but not least, the fifth panelist is Dr. Kavita Moti. She is the Chief Strategy Officer, Interlice Tax Services. Dr. Kavita Moti holds a PhD in Management, graduated from University of Greenwich, and Masters in Business Administration, majoring in International Business from UEL, University of East London. She is the first woman in Malaysia whom have achieved Master of Business Continuity Professional, MBCP, and has been awarded as Best Certified Business Continuity Professional, CBCP, in Malaysia. She is also the CyberSafe Ambassador of Cybersecurity Malaysia, an agency under MOSTI, and won CyberSafe Professional of the Year Award in 2016. Subsequently, in year 2019, she received an International Excellence Award as Best Cybersecurity Personality, given by the APJ Abdul Kalam International Foundation India for her contribution to raise cybersecurity awareness regionally. She is also voted as top 10 women in security in Malaysia. This award is in collaboration with Malaysian Women in Security, MYWIS. And she also honored as the 2021 Modern Governance 100 in the Cyber Risk Leader category by Diligent Corporation USA category for her contribution as the world's top governance practitioner. Well, without further ado, let us begin with the forum. And I would like to call upon Ms. Firoz. Ms. Firoz, the stage is yours. And I would like to call upon all the panelists on the stage. Please, Dr. Kavita, Puan Khatijah, Encik Azizi, Mr. Jason Leong, to come up on the stage.
So this topic was given to me to moderate. I thought it really doesn't make sense. There's too many big words in one sentence, which is what's the top? Inequality and sustainability. I then received, as most of you have done this morning, many wishes on Women's Day, and this one caught my eyes. Freedom is never free, by Maya Angelou. And then I thought, is empowerment synonymous to freedom? Is freedom synonymous to being sustainable in your life? Are we all truly free? Some of the elements that really moved me this morning, in addition to what exactly is inequality, exactly what equality are we all striving towards? As we sit here in Hilton, in the middle of Kuala Lumpur, I ask myself first, before most of you here, am I truly free? To then, am I truly empowered? On that note, I am Fairuz, often pronounced as Firoz. I'll take you through the next 90 minutes across 5 panelists. Tan Sri Jamila has submitted a pre-recorded message because she's got a meeting to attend. So she'll be our third panelist. We'll begin with 15 minutes by each of the panelists presenting their case. And I'll then open the floor. Before I open the floor to questions, I'll probe some questions. But essentially the questions that I hope the panelists will address are exactly what is sustainability, their understanding, what exactly do they mean by inequality, and if they want to be equal, what benchmarks should we strive towards? And then finally, what are the changing cultural and elements in our society and the society at large globally that's making us unequal? Thank you. So on that note, I invite the first panelist to present her case, Cik Jaminda. Cik Khadijah.
Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. And I think before that, I would like to wish everyone happy International Women's Day to all the women and men. Yeah? We need each other and we complement each other rather than competing with each other. So I think the first question that was thrown at me during the discussion was that what does it mean by gender equality? And I will try to interpret it from the perspective of economy. First of all, what is gender equality? In my view, gender equality means zero discrimination. And therefore, when it means zero discrimination, it can provide equal opportunity to everyone, regardless of their gender. Equal opportunity to what? Then equal access to opportunity as well as capital. Yeah? Much has been said about gender equality, but in my view, it's not about women must do whatever men does. Not necessarily, because while we say it's gender equality, but it must also be equitable, right? And then when it comes to pay and roles, does it have to be equal? Well, in my view, both should not be or must not be defined by gender. Yeah? All of us must compete based on merit, based on competency, as well as our own capability. So that is the only way that I think we can be equal as well. Yeah? And then the next question that was asked, what is sustainability? Yeah? So much talk about being sustainable. I think the simple word for sustainable may be about survival. Yeah? So does it mean that we will not be able to survive if we do not have this campaign of gender equality, or women cannot survive? I think it is more of a bigger agenda. The main agenda is actually how do we address poverty? It has something to do with the poverty, because there's a research that shows that if there's a 30% increase in the woman participation in the economic activities, yeah, be it as an employer, meaning as a business owner, or as an employee, there will be an increase of 12, the GDP will be improved by 12%. This is specifically in Malaysia. So that's why this, when we talk about gender equality, this can be a solution to end the poverty. And how do we begin, or where do we begin, right? So it started with the education. So if we look at Malaysian context, Malaysian actually measures the gender equality based on few elements. One of them is actually on education attainment, yeah, and then also based on economic participation. So it's interesting if we say it has to start with education, and therefore I think the awareness has been created. And if you look at the Malaysia Gender Gap Index, you measure this by if it's the closer it is to 1, meaning the equality is there. Yeah. So for education attainment, the index is more than 1. So meaning more women or more girls have attended schools, which is good. That's what we're trying to achieve, right? However, when we look at the economic participation, meaning from the perspective of being a business owner, employer, or even employees, then it has been at, I think, below 80. It's 70, 71. The latest, I think, is still about 71%, 0.71. So where do these women actually disappear? Huh? So in fact, when we look at, I think it's quite fair if we open the annual reports for any organizations, if you look at the population of the employees in any organization, you would see that many women are actually in the non-managerial levels, maybe entry levels, but not at the managerial levels, or not so much even if we talk about C-suite. Are they really emphasizing that there must be a certain percentage of women in the sitting at the top management or the C-suite? But I think that's where we need to address what actually went wrong. Yeah, and then we see that we talk about pandemic. When we have a pandemic, COVID-19 recently, then we thank the advancement in technology, where everybody actually able to work remotely. However, this has actually caused some issues with regards to work and life balance, right? Don't you agree? So, because at the same time, while you're working at home, you have to monitor the kids who are attending the online school, right? And it doesn't seem that the work doesn't seem to stop at 5. It continues 24/7, right? So while it's convenient, but it has also blurred the line between work and life. And interestingly, it seems like what we heard this morning, the impact seems to be more on the woman, but not on the man, right? So I think more needs to be done in terms of policy, yeah? And what actually had gone wrong? What happened to all the women that had gone through the colleges and that had graduated, right? That is one. And then, how do we address the gap? This is even more interesting. From the perspective of DFIs, DFIs are set up with their own mandates. So for instance, if you see AgroBank, the specialization is in agriculture and food industry. So if we look at SMEs, SMEs are actually the banks that actually take care of the SMEs, right? And so on. And for Bank Rakyat, I think it's for the cooperative societies. Then there's an overlap in terms of their developmental role when it comes to gender equality. So in my view, the tendency is the focus is not there. So it is interesting. I think somewhere in September 2021, America has established its own first woman bank. to address this economic participation amongst women, does it actually take a group of women to actually make sure that all the goals are met, right? Because what is interesting, what motivates the first women banks actually to open the account, they found out that the rate of the women participation in businesses or in the economy is actually faster compared to the rate of the assistance given to them. So they find that they need to focus on organization. I'm not sure whether that is actually the direction that Malaysia wants to take. Do you want to have a DFI specifically for women, right? And also, we know that recently when we look at, there was a survey done recently where Malaysia actually has recorded a rise in aging society, right? And while now we have an issue with the woman being the primary caregiver, that we have to have some flexibility in the working arrangement so that they can work and at the same time make sure that the kids are taken care of, right? So we have all the, I think the organizations are encouraged to have the childcare. Now, when we have a new problem later on, the aging society, do we need a special care, a home for the elderly then? Because more often than not, the woman, the daughters, right, will be the primary caregiver again for the parents, right? So that is another, I think, another issue that we need to look at. So in short, how do we address the gap? I think it's more of one is on the, when we are looking at women being employees, it's more of the flexible working arrangement. And how do we make sure that there's a work and life balance, right? Then sustainability, what is it actually sustainability, right? We talk about being to survive, yeah? It's about a survival. And then I also believe that everyone needs to play the role because all of us are actually part of the value chain. Being a bank, yes, bank has the responsibility to make sure that all men and women, all businesses actually have access to the financing, right? And if we see today, not just the DFIs, but even the commercial banks actually, they have a specific products for women, yeah, for women. And then for organization, it will provide them with the competitive advantage the moment they address this gender equality. Because now all organizations in the world are actually talking about sustainability, right? So they can become more attractive when it comes to investment. Then I think the next thing that I want to talk about is how do we measure this gender equality? This morning we heard about Bloomberg has its own gender equity index, right? But for us in Malaysia, we have the index that I mentioned just now, but whether that is enough or not. But for an organization, they may have their own internal measurement, right? The KPI. But at the national level, maybe we need to do more in terms of measuring the success of all the initiatives that have been put in place, rather than just tracking the numbers, but the effectiveness of that. I think, and the last point, for an organization, then whether to measure their own performance or as a bank, how to assess the viability of the businesses owned by women or men, we need to talk about measuring profitability beyond financial. We must also measure success by this social as well as environment agenda. So that must be in the KPIs as well for the banks, and this must be translated in their processes as well. So that's from me.
Thank you. Before I hand over to the next panelist, Chair Azizi, just a few triggers or thought-provoking questions from your. You don't have to answer now, but we'll take it at the end. Is when you talk about inequality, how's that linked to the cultural state of a country? So, what's unequal in what I deem as unequal in Malaysia may not be unequal in the same form of inequality in another culture. It may be they may be perfectly okay with it, right? So also what are the benchmarks to that? You don't have to answer now. And then the next thought that came to mind as you were speaking was which comes first? Should sustainability come first, or inequality, defining inequality or addressing inequality come first? Which gives us dignity first? As human beings, we begin with having self-dignity. So which gives us dignity first, the sustainability aspect or the inequality aspect? And on that point, I hand over to Encik Azizi. Thank you.
Thank you, Virus. Assalamualaikum, and very good afternoon to everyone. And also thank you to Adfim for inviting me to give some thoughts, about the topics, that have been outlined today. I must admit it's tough, for me to talk about this topic, especially in front of a lot of very high-powered ladies, women, including the Madam Moderator. And also the most of the people in front of me are basically the gender of interest. And so I have to be careful in terms of my statements, in terms of my comments. But I'll just hopefully this is like a kind of like a free forum, that we can just speak our mind as we go along. Before I touch on the substance of the topic that's been assigned to me, I just would like to share some of the kind of like general statistics, that will kind of like lay out the foundation for deeper discussion on the topic, about or more on the culture, how the culture basically influence the equality or inequality in Malaysia, especially. Okay, you perhaps can just move to the next one. I'm not sure why I keep on bouncing back. The next one. Next one. Okay, these are just the normal statistics. Generally the female labor force participation has increased over the years, as you can see from here, and also is leading in some of the sectors. And based on the statistics from DOSM, the Department of Statistics, the woman participation in the labor has risen actually from about 44% way back in 1982 to about close to about 50% in 2012, and then it surpassed 2013 by about 50%, and now it's roughly about 55.3%. And based on the 11 Malaysia plan, which ended about 2 years ago, we are supposed to achieve 57%. So we are about there. But of course, if you look at the incremental, people may argue, that has been a bit kind of like slow, for the last 40 years. The incremental is roughly about 10% or roughly about 0.25% per annum. But at the same time, you see the male labor force participation has decreased, slightly for the last 5 years, hovering about 80%. I think what is important, since we're talking about the gender equality or inequality, is the gap, between the male and the female, or between men and women participation. If you can see on the right, the gap has basically gone down, from about 40% to about 25.2% at this moment. So the question, while the gap has been narrowed down, what about the quality of the contribution? I think Puan Khadijah did touch on this one. Are we just satisfied, with the narrowing of the gap, or we want to see the quality, the contribution of the woman, in our economy? Yeah, I think that is one of the questions that we have to ponder, and I'll touch a bit on this one as we move later on. Next, please. Okay, these are basically just in terms of the industry. If you look at the industry, most of the female workers are employed in the industry which kind of like predominantly required feminine touches in the area of wholesale, on the retail, manufacturing, education, and also the hospitality or the food and services. And these industries are mostly associated with the private sectors. So what about the public sectors? Can we move to the next slide? Okay, this is, even though this is kind of like in 2016, but the number kind of like has not changed that much. So only about 36.5% basically women, involved in the public sector. And I suppose most of the women in the public sector work in the education-related field, hospitality, especially in the medical-related industry. So if you look, interestingly, if you look at the demographics, I know it's kind of like small, but if you put aside, Klang Valley and Penang, high percentage of the women workforce in the public area basically are in the states where the Bumiputra population is generally higher. Yeah? So my question is something for us to ponder. Is this being the influence or got to do with the ethnicity and also the culture? So we're talking about the culture. Does it mean that this in the predominantly states where we have a lot of Bumiputra, that is where normally the entrance, of the woman into the workforce happen. Yeah? So that is something that we also have to kind of bear in mind. I will again touch some of this later on. Next. Okay, now let's move to the closer to the topic of interest and also discussion. Next. Okay, in Malaysia, perhaps it's true also in most part of the world, there is virtually no or little barrier for females to enter any industry of occupation or occupations. And even in Malaysia today, we can see female labor force in kind of like masculine related industries, such as constructions, services industry. We can see now a lot of women pilots. We can see the operators or the those drivers, of heavy machinery, which was kind of like something we did not see in the past. Yeah, and so what's actually stopping us from seeing more and more entrance of the female in many other industries, especially in the past? Yeah, just now I mentioned, they are more focused on kind of like feminine-related industries, but what's stopping them, from moving into other industries? So these are my thoughts, basically. One has to do with the cultural sentiment, without touching specifically in any race or religion. As we know, for some, especially the baby boomers generations, talking about generations that was born in 1960s, in the 50s, they are basically the thoughts, are the ladies or the women were more destined or suited for the housewife roles. Yeah, this was the old kind of like a mindset or thinking. And they, as one Khatijah mentioned just now, they are looking, they are more like expected to look after the family, the kids, while the man would be the one that go out and bring the source of income. And for generations, I suppose, it was kind of like taboo, for women to work in formal sectors. If they need to work, basically, they have to find a job which is flexible, which is like part-time jobs, 9 to 5. And also it has to be like feminine-related jobs, which partly explain why professions such as teachers, the educators, or nursing suited them well. And working in private sectors were deemed inappropriate at the time due to long working hours and high expectations set by the employers. This high expectation has somehow inadvertently set higher qualification requirement and standards for any jobs in the private sectors. I will touch on the education a bit later on. The other factor will be the job security. you know that the distinguish, one of the distinguished factors between the private sectors and public sectors, normally jobs are more secured in the public sectors. You hardly heard, that people get retrenched, in the public sectors, unlike in the private sectors. So this stigma, of you being retrenched could be seen as something negative by the society. So perhaps that is also one of the reasons, why, especially the ladies, they tend to work more in the public sectors rather than in the private sectors. The employers also set some favoritism, in terms of jobs requirement. I'm sure some of you, maybe the slightly older generation, you used to see job advertisements say that only female applicants, and also there are some set requirements, only certain age limit, only singles, used to have that kind of like a criteria set for any of the jobs requirement. And normally, if you look in the past, female only or the job opportunities actually were plenty or abundance, for the lower job positions. We require kind of like a handle with attitude or attribute, such as the operators in the factory, nurses, and customer service. So this, I term it like jobs stereotyping, had resulted or posted some influence in the level of education as well, career advancement, and the economic value of contribution by the female workforce. Next, please. Next. Okay, and due to this favoritism, there are basically a gender pay gap, exists, especially in the private sectors. For the public sector, it was not really kind of like the case because it follows the salary structure or the salary scale. But when it comes to the career advancement, private sectors usually open better path for female to hold important or senior positions. I think Puan Khadijah mentioned about meritocracy. I think in the private sectors, meritocracy has been in practice, for many, many years in the past. And based on the DOSM data in 2017, the women degree holders basically on average get only about 76% of what men get paid. But of course, this scenario has changed over the years. Next. Okay. In the 2020, the median monthly salary for full-time Malaysian women was about 96% of that of their male counterparts. I suppose the improvement or narrowing the gap, the gender pay gap, is progressing well, especially with the SDG or the Sustainable Development Goals, being embraced by the governments and also their businesses. This job stereotyping has also created or influenced the field of studies among the girls, in the past. Alhamdulillah, today the post-baby boomer generations, they are no longer influenced by this phenomena, and they are more liberal, they are more open, and the advancement of the education also plays a part, in changing this job stereotyping. In the past, I think we know that girls, tend to choose social sciences, education or arts major, where jobs were generally low paying on average. Despite in Malaysia, the education system basically provides equal opportunity between boys and girls. So how can we address this inequality, both in the public and the private sectors? Next. Next. The Malaysian government makes continuous efforts to increase labour participation of women. This includes effort to increase the representation of women in decision-making positions in the private sector, such as the establishment of a target of 30% and also the launching of initiative in July 2017 to publish the names of public listed companies without women on their board of directors. The National Women Policy and Action Plan 2009 to 2015 of Malaysia outlined efforts to encourage the private sector to implement flexible working arrangements to provide wider opportunities for women to participate in the labour force. The removal of gender discrimination in workplace, especially among the private sectors, whereby meritocracy should be the key principle. And there are also other initiatives include setting up of a special window under the Human Resources Development Fund for training of women, especially on the high technology and technical fields. And I think the campaigns have been intensified of late to increase awareness of women's rights. And also the at work as well as the educational program and training for women to address, for example, sexual harassment at the workplace. And I believe the Sexual Harassment Act is being planned to be tabled in the current parliament session. And also the various prerequisites to encourage entrance of women in the workplace, such as the provision of the childcare, flexible work arrangement, parental leave, to name a few as well. So these are the efforts. Of course, this is not the comprehensive efforts, but these are some of the efforts being taken by the government as well as the private sectors, to encourage the entrance of women into the workplace. Next. Before I kind of like end my sharing, I would like to touch on this current affair of COVID-19 on pandemic. Has it derailed, some of the efforts what we have seen so far? I think, as you know, that the COVID, the pandemic has changed a lot of the landscape, the way that we work, kind of accelerated. In the past, people talk, especially in Malaysia, people talk about working from home, but it was only a thought, until the pandemic happened that we were forced, to really, without any choice, to kind of like practice this working from home. And also the adoption of technology has also been accelerated, due to the pandemic. The use of the e-commerce, e-wallet, whatever under this metaverse per se. And we cannot run away, from the fact, as what Puan Khadijah mentioned just now, working from home for a woman, especially for the working mother, is more taxing and burdening as compared to the men. They need to juggle between the domestic responsibilities, work responsibilities. They have to look after their children on online classes. They have to do housekeeping, cooking, you name it. So this has somehow caused like a burnout, if effect on these working mothers versus men. Will this result in more women exit employment? Yeah, this is something that we have to ponder, And also, will this actually result in more women left out in their career progression because of their work rate, because of their productivity, and perhaps quality of work may be affected, having to juggle between looking after the family and also the work, the balancing act they need to do. And if it is, then of course the gap between the gender equality and the woman economic contribution to the GDP and statistics, as I mentioned just now, will start to widen again. Yeah, of course it will be balanced. There are also some men basically left the employment and so forth. But I think the rate of the women leaving employment because of the current pandemic, I would reckon, is higher compared to the men. Yeah, and also with a lot more people right now move into the informal. A lot of people now, especially the ladies, the women, they become entrepreneur. Yeah, because of they're losing jobs. Now they are working from home. So will that kind of also contribute, to some of the efforts and the statistics, which I shared just now. So this is perhaps something that we can also discuss, something that we can also give some thoughts. With that, I kind of end my short sharing session this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Encik Azizi. So thank you so much. So before we go to Tan Sri Jamila's pre-recorded message, just some thoughts on your presentation. Thank you so much. So the questions that immediately come to mind is, what are the industries that women need to, you showed a chart on a couple of industries that they are very focused on, and so the question is, do they need to be involved in more industries for us to be more sustainable or not? And if so, what are the industries you think? And how, from the DUFI's perspective, we can encourage this? And also, you touched on the topic of culture. Culture is a very complex subject. It's so nebulous. And inequality is a policy-making subject. So how do you reconcile something that's so nebulous into something that's quite concrete, like policy-making, and then set targets towards that? And then the final one, I mean, this one, not necessarily for Azizi to take, any of the panelists later can take these questions. So thoughts that came to mind. The talks that we've heard this morning and this afternoon now with the two panelists is so much into inequality, everyone get into the economy, everyone work. But part of sustainability, is it not that you need to have stable families? So how do we maintain stable families which contributes to mental health issues, to also sustainability issues? For a country to be prosperous, you need to have every part of this element in that jigsaw fit properly. So those are some of the thoughts that came to mind as Encik Azizi was speaking. So and the next one would be Tan Sri Jamila's pre-recorded message on sustainability, I believe. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy International Women's Day, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with all of you today, albeit virtually, on a topic that has defined and will continue to define how our species evolves: gender equality. More specifically, gender equality today, although I must admit that in my view, both gender equality and sustainability should be topics of yesterday. Why do we still need to be discussing it and continually pushing this agenda when logic and common sense indicates that this should be a done deal? Yet the world that we live in today shows that gender equality is still a subject of intense power struggles, something that is strangely feared by so many, and sadly, in the profession that I work in, often simply a box to be superficially checked. I now lead a new research and engagement center called the Sunway Center for Planetary Health, where the priority is to connect humanity's dots and move from silos to systems. For humanity to be healthy, safe, and sustainable, we also need the planet to be healthy, safe, and sustainable. So in the time that I have today, let me touch on a few points. Firstly, sustainability means equality and equity. One cannot thrive without the other. But it saddens me that even in discourse on sustainability, equality is patchy at best. At the United Nations Climate Change Conference 2019, only 41 of the 196 international delegations were led by women. That's only 21%. Figures are unclear for representation in the much more recent COP26 in Glasgow late last year. But pictures found online show very few women leaders. In global health itself, only 25% of top senior leaders are women. Frankly, I find this baffling, considering that in my daily engagements with sustainability leaders and environment advocates, many are women. The good news is that when I was in Dubai just last week for the 2020 Dubai Expo, I was thrilled to see that the sustainability team was women-led, and by women who believe and practice feminist leadership, collaborative in their approaches, but firm and compassionate in their resolutions. Yet the faces that we see as representing our voices for how we would like our future to look like don't necessarily look like us. Certainly not like me, an Asian Muslim woman. An interesting conundrum is that while COP meetings have been overwhelmingly dominated by men, and representation on climate change in global media is male dominated. In a speech to the Energy Law Institute's annual Clifford Chance Lecture in October 2021, Emma Howard Boyd, CBE, chair of the UK's Environment Agency, said, "Women have to shout louder than men to be heard. Women have held just 28% of the share of voice in news articles about climate change." Unquote. But caring about sustainability and our relationship with the planet is often regarded as feminine, and in our unfortunately patriarchal society, less important. This green feminine stereotype is a real thing. A 2016 study found that more women than men lean towards practicing sustainable lifestyles because being eco-friendly is somehow equated to being girly, and so for some reason, uncool. Just picture your typical definition of strength. More often than not, many would visualize big, buff men in gyms, heavy meat eaters, despite the fact that the livestock industry contribute 14.5% of the total global carbon emissions, as cool. I don't think there's anything cool about that. It is often said that women hold up half the sky. When I picture strength and resilience, I see the courageous girls, women, mothers that I've had the honor to meet in my years as a medical practitioner and a humanitarian, all in various challenging settings. I have seen how peace and democracy was won, where tyranny was disposed of, when market women in Liberia of both Christian and Muslim faiths collaborated in the elections. It is a fascinating story, and if you can, please find and watch the wonderful docufilm, Pray the Devil Back to Hell, to understand what I'm saying better. I'm constantly reminded that where women are respected and where gender equality thrives, the entire community benefits, and from better health outcomes, better education, stronger community bonds. We must get rid of this perception that being conscious of our carbon footprint and caring about our impact on the environment are merely a mental playground for girls and women. Planetary health is a human rights issue, one that affects us all. Secondly, what we label as climate change is far more than that. It is a monstrous attack on the rights and freedoms of the majority of the human race by a small but very powerful minority. Whether consciously or not, its drivers are a fundamental disrespect for the girls and for the rights of all, Its consequences are now manifesting as breaches in the rights to life, self-determination, development, food, health, water and sanitation, and housing. It is a reality that is affecting every region of the world. We cannot talk about sustainability without acknowledging that this is more than mere change. This is a crisis, and it is a crisis that impacts more severely on women, girls, the elderly, and other vulnerable groups. And so thirdly, investing and ensuring access to financing is key to addressing gender disparities. She-cession became a disturbing term in 2020 because although women represent only 39% of the global workforce, they accounted for 54% of job losses at the height of the pandemic in May 2020. Making sure that our tomorrow is sustainable means addressing this kind of inequity doing away with outdated discriminatory social norms and beliefs that only do harm, disconnected from the barriers that marginalized populations face. Finally, when we talk of a vision for a just and equal Malaysia, and when we talk of sustainable financing, we need to leverage the power of money, not just its value. Taxes play a key role in supporting our nation's decarbonization efforts, for incentivizing the private sector to engage in gender-just policies and practices, as well as measures that will help to clean up our lived environment, thereby protecting both people and planet, women, men, girls, and boys. All of these actions require money, and that is why today's session is so important. Financial institutions must embrace this and take the lead, cleaning up our financial systems and working to make them benefit society through equitable access to finance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today because I had parents who believed in gender equality, a father who taught me to read from the age of 2 and who allowed me to read over his shoulder as a clingy child, exposed to Neville Shute and Dickens, as well as Utusan Melayu from a tender age. I'm what I am today with the unfailing support of a loving husband who not only believes in equal rights for women, but acknowledges where we are stronger, and who picks me up and pushes me upwards and forwards when I feel the challenges are too much to bear. In other words, we need to be partners, men and women, for this world to be a better place. Respect, humility, courage, and perseverance will be needed in good measure. Before I close, I would like to remind everyone that while today is a day of celebration for all the amazing strides that women have shown in the cause of humanity, today is also a reminder of the awful mountain we must continue to climb to advance these milestones further. This cannot be just a one-off discussion every year. It must be a trigger to change the way we talk, the way we act and engage, so that women and men can maximize sustainability and prosperity for our country by together recognizing the respective roles that we can and should be fully enabled to play. Once again, gender equality is not a box to be checked, and neither is sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't quite pose questions to her, although she has answered one of the questions that I have asked, which we will air later. But on that note, before I pass the floor to Dr. Kavita, just a point on just leading up to your presentation, Doctor, is what is the difference between, we've heard so many nouns today, freedom, empowerment, dignity, but primarily, I think I began the session by asking the question, is freedom and empowerment the same and interchangeable? So let me read you a very simple definition, the simplest I could find without boring you is, freedom is the state of being free, of not being imprisoned or enslaved. Empowerment is granting of political, social, or economic power to an individual or a group. So on that note, I'll hand over to Dr.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Selamat sejahtera and a happy evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to say the gentleman word here today, though we have the majority of the women's presence. First of all, give a big round of applause to yourself. Okay, the mic was very happy to hear the applause as well and supported the applause from all the women here. Now, thank you very much for having me here, and this event wouldn't be possible without the presence and the support of the men. So again, give another round of applause for the men who have been supporting this event. And of course, I'm so privileged and honored to be here on the same stage and to share the same thoughts around gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow with all the distinguished speakers as well as the leading women in the industry. And I'm so happy to be here today. So moving on to the topic and also some statement that Farouz actually posted just now. It is about why women empowerment is essential for sustainable development. I'm going to try this if it's working. To the slideshow? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Now, is women empowerment, okay, is women empowerment is just the right thing to talk about or the right thing to do? And it's a new book of argument, I must say, because the deeper connection that you get to talk about women empowerment, it is coming back to the question of gender equality. And genuinely, it is about sustainable development. So the environment must allow women to be more productive. All of us recognize that. All of us believe in that. And starting to instill the interest among ourselves is what is more important than for all of us to even think about equality and sustainability. So endless effort is definitely required from all of us to improve our participation as women in all the industry that is leading the government, that is leading our country, that is developing our country to the next level. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about a selected domain later. And the reason for that is because some of the evidence have definitely showed that diverse teams produce better outcome. Don't you agree with that? So that diverse team means it is about you, it is about me, it is about women, it is about men to collaborate, not to compete each other. I'm going to talk more a little bit about it later. This is a very interesting statistic that we had took yesterday from the LinkedIn. Fortunately, it's because 8 March and everybody talk about gender equality. It is 8 March and everybody talk about International Women's Day. It is 8 March and everyone is here today to even ponder the thoughts around the same topic. Now, why do we have to have an International Women's Day to recognize the equality? We don't need that, right? Because the International Women's Day happened during World War II, was given the recognition for women who have to come out to be as part of the labor, to be as part of the workforce, who have lost their husbands, but to serve their family, to serve the food on the table. But today, I don't think so. We need International Women's Day to recognize who we are today. We are very unique, aren't we? We are very special. We are always motivated. We don't have to fight with the men, but we collaborate with the men to work together. So with that note, if you see, especially this statistic yesterday, shown that from Singapore to United States to India, Singapore being the highest, 36%, and India being the 18%. Can you find Malaysia there? Mana perginya? I also don't know what is our percentage now. Thank you to Encik Azizi and also for Khadija just now. You shared a lot of statistics, and I do not want to talk about the statistic now. Let's move on from the Malaysian context. Are you saying that we do not have a space in our country? Do you think that space which has been given to us is not enough? I don't think so, right? All of us definitely and absolutely agree that the policy and the practices that our government or any part or any organization in the country has always been giving an advance attention to the women. We have women aid organization. Why there is no men aid organization? We have Persatuan Pembangunan Usahawan Wanita. Why we don't have Pembangunan Usahawan Lelaki? Aren't we not getting enough attention? Right? Okay, look at this. In 1955, Police Enforcement Unit was already officially announced. And if you look at the ministries, the line of cabinets, we have only 5 people, women, sitting in the leadership role. But if you look at the public service and public limited companies, 38% of the government agency in Malaysia, which is rightfully said by Encik Azizi, public sectors, women are selecting to be at public sectors because we think that it is more comfortable place, more security is being given to that job, right? But if you look at the private sector, how many women are there sitting at the board? And why do we need to be given a quota that at least by this year, please try to achieve 25.8% or 30% for that matter. Now I think it's 30%. Why do we need all this attention to be given to the women in our country? I do not want to compare with other countries, though it's an international day. Now, women in technology is something that I want to touch, the selected domain that I want to talk about. I think I'm seeing some of my ex-colleagues here. So, what our country has given to the women is to be participative in the industry that is growing. Now, I ask you a question. We are sitting on IR 4.0 innovation and the revolution that is happening. How many of you, have adopted to be in the platform of technology, to be in the technology that enable you to grow in this country? How many of you have actually taken the opportunity to go on top and make use of the technology that can grow your career? Put up your hand. We are just comfortable where we are today, right? Now, every opportunity is already given. It's just a matter of whether we are ready, whether we are prepared, whether we want to take it or we do not want to take it. I think I've been hearing people say that, what happened to the girls who have finished their college? What happened to the ladies who have done with their graduation? To be honest, when I conduct interview, some of the women partially will come and tell, I'm here, if I can get a job, I will work for you. If I don't, besok aku kahwin. Right? So I think that's coming back to the point of culture, right? How we are brought up, how we were taught to think. Right, we're women. At the end of the day, you got to be in the kitchen. But today, I tell you, even the kitchen is technologically driven with artificial intelligence, with augmented reality. You don't have to be in the kitchen. While I'm working here, I can make use of my remote control to switch on my light, switch off my gas. Isn't that great? What technology can do for you? Do you still need to worry about being at the competitive age when you are not driven by technology? Whom to be blamed? Is it the government? Is it the society? Or is it ourselves? My journey. A little journey that I would like to share with you. I never had an ambition to become a director of a company until it only happened because a man who mentored me, who had strongly encouraged me to think big, to take risk, to meet influential people, not because I want to become a famous person or gain the fame, but rather influential. That's the difference between influential and fame. So I think many women like me, in the modest of their aspiration, and do not even think of becoming an award-winning entrepreneur today, which for the past 20 years, I have crafted my journey from a secretary, graduated from Rima College, to who I am today. it is not because anything else, but because of myself, what I want. How do I prepare myself? Where do I want to be? What is my purpose? Ask yourself. And all we're asking today, do not talk about inequality anymore. You are equally given a space in this country. And if you're not making use of those opportunities which has already been opened, I do not think so that we could ever go anywhere else. So I'm proud to be a Malaysian, and an Indian Malaysian. A change in narrative is required, ladies. My beautiful ladies, think about it. Winning or losing is just happening faster than before. In the ever-changing world, you are well connected with all kind of people and resources that has been given to you. What is empowerment? The opportunity, the resources, the support that is being given to you to make yourself to be more motivated, to make yourself to be more reliable, that has already been given to you. Now, it's just a matter of time for you to think whether I want to take it, I want to be there, I want to change, or I do not want to change. You want to change, or you are letting the change to drive you. And for human trait, believe in me, today, technology is the value trait for all of us. Like I said, even your kitchen can be controlled from few kilometers away. Why don't you become the model of that technology to manage your family with the technology that has already been given to you? Just make use of it. Where does the work-life balance come? That's a very good topic that I would love to share with the rest of the speakers later. Now, there goes the holistic business model. Life is about running like a business. You need to have a model. Consciously think how you want to run your life like a business model. Everything is about making profit and making yourself known and presentable. Never complain that you are underrepresented. It is us who did not go to the front table. I give you an example today, just now. Firoz was there, Puan Khadija was there, all the ladies at the back. Who was sitting at the front seat? All the men. Why the women do not want to come and sit together with them? That's the point. Women come to the front table. It is always us who think about setting up ourselves at the back. Tak apalah lelaki dulu. Tapi in the concept, people say ladies first. In actual fact, what is the meaning of ladies first? Give respect? No, take opportunity. Not only give respect, but grab the opportunity. Okay, so now the challenges, we all have been talking about the challenges. We have a lot of questions that we want to ask ourselves. Oh, there's no right education. Oh, there is confidence gap. Go for motivational talk, right? Go and source for education. Malaysia is growing as an education hub. What is stopping us? I tell you, if you want to do not compete with the men. But if you want to be equally to the men, what matters the most is your competency. What matters the most is your education. What matters the most is your skill. Build yourself. Build up your career. That's how you can actually fill up the confidence gap. Show up and stand out. There's something about changing together that I would like to share with you all later. How you can become an entrepreneur, or even if you're working as a technical, as an IT personnel in an organization, this model definitely would help you. You can catch up with me later, and I'm going to pass the floor shortly to my fellow speaker and my moderator about one thing. Change is everything that happens and starts from you. And why it matters is because the collaborative and also the adaptability is something that can actually move you further. That is about empowerment. Do not wait for empowerment come from people like us. The empowerment should start from you. Go back and empower your mom, empower your daughters, empower your son, empower your family, empower your neighbor. That's how naturally you are nurturing the empowerment in you. So moving ahead, pandemic has changed everything that works for us today. Whether the question today I want to ask all of you, are you ready to change with the way, with the flow that the pandemic has changed the world? And for that, new tech, new world. I'm going to leave this question for you to think about. The new wave of women leaders, it comes from you. Breaking the glass ceiling, or you want to face the glass cliff? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Happy evening.
Thank you, Dr. Kavita. Very empowering. Just a few questions that triggered me from your presentation. Thank you very much. It was very good. So you spoke predominantly on empowerment. Does empowerment really change from society to society? Are we imposing a Western form of empowerment on an Eastern definition of Eastern version of empowerment? Is something that came to mind. And then what do you think of a tokenism culture that we've spoken about a lot this morning as part of being empowered? So someone calls me to be a board member, or because we have to fill up 30%. Should I feel empowered, or should I feel quite humiliated? It's a question that I have for a woman to answer. And then to be empowered, I need my partner, the man, to enable me to be empowered. So the role of men and fathers in promoting gender equality. On that note, I'd like to invite Mr. Jason to speak.
There are no slides for my presentation. I just feel like I should be standing and addressing all of you. I can see and every one of you so much better. I think perhaps one pertinent question that you have immediately after seeing Dr. Kavita's presentation, where does Malaysia stand in that list? We actually have, under the Department of Statistics Malaysia, there is an index called Malaysia Gender Gap Index, MGGI, and that is also plugged into the Global Gender Gap Index. The latest index put us at 71.4% at 2020. What is our ranking today? 74 out of 156 countries. That is Malaysia. So we are way far behind Singapore. This particular index measures 4 main dimensions: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and lastly, political empowerment. So let me just plug in that gap. All right. Okay, I think we have heard quite a bit about gender equality, and I think there's no need for me to define it. I think we're all agreed. More importantly, I think what Tan Sri Jamila mentioned just now in her presentation is that there are 2 parts of it. Gender equality is the objective. Gender equity is the process by which we reach the objective. And that process is very important because this is the process that we are going through every day and in fact every year until today, and we're still not there yet. So in that sense, as we know, gender equality also must mean that society will look at men and women as equal value, and not only just equal value, and as full partners in the full sense of the word, at home, out there in the community, and eventually the society itself. Therefore, it is certainly a responsibility for everybody, men and women involved. In fact, for the past 20 years, there has been increased attention to a very important aspect, that is the positive role of men as partners and allies to achieve and build a more gender-responsive and just society. I think we all know about the negative aspects of talking about domestic violence and all those negative parts of men. But now the emphasis is towards the more positive aspect. And this is where we need to know how men can play an active role in promoting gender equality. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why perhaps I was invited for this particular summit and conference, because I represent a new NGO in Malaysia called Better Dads Malaysia. We will launch officially on November 19, 2019. Anyone of you know what is the significance of November 19? Just as today is International Women's Day, November 19 every year is actually International Men's Day. We got our ROS registration in April 2019, and we were rushing to do the launching on Father's Day in June, but unfortunately, time does not permit. But we were, so the next best date we could do was, okay, November 19. So now you know, November 19 is International Men's Day, and that is also our launching day and our anniversary for Better Dads Malaysia. What is important is that there is also a very disturbing report called the State of the World's Fathers 2021 report. This is a global report, and this particular report measures what the fathers are in all the various countries, how the fathers are doing. And one of the questions that they were asking is the same thing, you know, how can we get to, how long does it take for men to help women to get to gender equality? And this report, the latest one that was published in 2021, gave a very pessimistic picture. It says, at the rate that we are going, where men are not doing their part in unpaid care at home, unpaid care work at home, it is clear that it will probably take about 92 years before we can reach gender equality. You know, as you know, a lot of men, me included, we spend a lot of time at work. And then the unpaid house chores, caring work at home are usually done by the wife and the ladies and the women, right? So the man does very little of the unpaid care, because that is actually work. Because who pays for the cooking? Who pays for the washing? Who pays for the babysitting, taking care of the child, sending the kids to school, teaching the kids? All those, if you classify it as work, that needs to be paid. But obviously, because of culture and everything else, that is not paid. And then men go out and say, I get paid for doing my work, and I come back, this is my money. So if men were to play the same role and take their part in the unpaid care kind of work at home, then there will be more progress towards that. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic situation, lockdown, the MCOs that we had, probably has contributed some positive aspect towards that. There are negative aspects as well. There has been a rise of, unfortunately, domestic violence, not only among B40s, but we are doing work on the ground, we know, even among the T20 and the M40 as well. Why? Because when there is a lockdown, I think the men had no choice but to do their part and contribute in the house chores, taking care of the kids, the babies, and everything else. So they have increased. Because we are an NGO, we run workshops very often. And we have in our, this is not a very formal study that we have, but based on the evidence that we have about 200 men who are on our various WhatsApp group, because we have conducted something like about 20 workshops. So about 200 men. And when we asked a simple question, how have you men increased the number of hours? How many hours have you increased in terms of your unpaid care work during the pandemic? So we get replies like, on average, about 3.5 hours increase, incremental. But for the wives and the ladies, Unfortunately, there was an incremental of 6 hours. So it is, it is a moving target. More the men try to chase out, but then the women are also doing their part so much more during the pandemic. But we will still need to do something as well. Okay, I think there was also a question on, I've been asked to address, is there a model from any country that we can find to see that we can follow for Malaysia? There are models, but first of all, let me say the good thing about Malaysia first. Yes, Malaysia, Singapore today may be first on the list, but back in 1969, just after our independence, Malaysia first Prime Minister, our beloved Tunku Abdul Rahman, appointed the first female cabinet minister in his cabinet in 1969. This was way, way more progressive than so many countries, far more progressive than Singapore. When did Singapore ever appoint the first female cabinet minister? Not in 1969, not in 1979, not in 1999. It took them up to 2009 before they appointed the first female cabinet minister. So for Malaysians, we take comfort that sometimes we are far ahead as well. But now, sometimes we lose out. But take heart. In terms of some models of maybe, I think one of the most popular model that we always want to talk about is that, gender equality means, let's talk about paternity leave, We have maternity leave for the ladies, no issue, but what about paternity leave for the men, So I always get this kind of question bombarded at me. Hey, you guys are better dads Malaysia, you better do something for the men. I say, we don't function that way. We exist not because we want to advocate more rights for men, no. Our organization is not advocating such kind of thing. I mean, if there is a good policy for paternity leave, well, fine, we'll support it. But beyond that, I think if you want to look at some of those policies in some countries, Lithuania and Hungary probably are way ahead because they offer up to 156 weeks, 3 years for paternity leave. The first 52 weeks, the first year 52 weeks, I mean, men in these two countries can take 1 year off full pay. The next 2 years, they say we leave it to both the parents to decide. Husband and wife, you want to take 1 year, then you can take the second year, then the husband will take the third year, and that is at 80% pay, 70% pay. So that is Lithuania and Hungary. Sweden has 480 days, same thing, let the parents, father and mother decide. Now, what about the stigmas about men? Well, there was a time when men were told not to cry. Brave men only must be heroes. We shed blood, not shed tears. There was also a time where men are told to always to stop whining and just man up, and do your job. There is a kind of ancient predefined vision of or version of masculinity. Not very good, actually, because that perpetuates sometimes masculinity into something that it becomes rather toxic. There are certain norms about what it means to be a man. Men are less likely to see doctors than ladies, but men are probably less likely to talk about their feelings and emotions than ladies. But the worst thing is that because of that, they are more likely to commit suicide. The suicide numbers in Malaysia shows that the men outnumber the women. So as I mentioned, when Better Dads Malaysia was set up, we only had one vision, very simple, to see every child in Malaysia to grow up with an involved, responsible father. That's all. So what we are pushing is to re-educate men, or educate men and empower men, equip men to become better fathers. We are not saying that we're going to be the best fathers, but all men can become better fathers one day at a time. All right? So if you are not so good today, but you can be a better dad tomorrow and the day after. So never too late and never give up. So that was that is our vision. And like I say, we have conducted quite a number of workshops. And in all our workshops, I think all our men, when we ask them, you know, would you want to do more to do your part to contribute towards gender equality, towards family? All of men, inevitably, all of them, 100%, they say yes, that's what we want. So very much it is about changing mindsets. A lot of our men grow up with that kind of Asia, you know, big boss kind of mentality. I'm the head of the household, you know. I decide, you don't say anything, you know, because this is what my father do, that's what my father's father did. And that was a default model. Unfortunately, the default model, if that model is not replaced with a better model, that habit will perpetuate itself and it will go into that vicious cycle. This is what Better Dads Malaysia is trying to do, to break that cycle, to give men a better model of fathering. And when we presented this to the Ministry of Women and Family Development and Community Development, we actually challenged some of those policies in the ministry and by the LPPKN, because they have been conducting a lot of parenting workshop. Bengkel ke ibu bapaan. We say, very good, parenting workshop, no problem. But the problem with parenting workshop is that 80% of the parenting workshop participants are ladies, and 20% are men. And that 20% come because the wife forced them to come. So eventually, they don't even want to say anything during the workshop. You know, they will only say the correct, politically correct thing because the wife is there. Right. So we say, let's do an exclusively fathering workshop. Then there must be a mothering workshop, you know, so exclusive. When they are put exclusively separated, we see the impact because they learn so much more. And the interaction and the sharing, everything that comes out, you know, when exclusively men in the workshop, you'll be surprised of the things that the men talked about, and there was a never-ending kind of discussion. In fact, fathering skill and mothering skill are totally different skill sets. The mothering skill can be by way of analogy. I mean, if you want to grow a plant, the mothering skill is water. But water alone cannot make the plant grow. Fathering skill is equivalent to sunlight. So with water and sunlight, the plant will blossom and it will grow very well. So they are separate skill set, both are equally needed, they complement each other. And in that workshops that we do, we also teach our men never to stereotype your children. You know, I learned it because at one time I was like, you know, my daughter, when I buy her stuff, I buy her t-shirts, I will buy a pink color one, and then for the brother, I'll buy the blue color one. And my daughter said, I don't want to wear the pink one, I want the black one. So I need to learn and say, okay, you make your choice. You want the black, you go and buy the black one then. You know, you buy her a school bag, you know, I give her a Barbie school bag, and she say, no, I don't want to carry a Barbie school bag. I want a Star Wars school bag, you know, and I want the Star Wars saber, you know, so I want to do sword fighting. I want to play football. So, like what Tan Sri Jamila mentioned just now, actually she said, right, it was the father who gave her that kind of freedom, who did not put her in the box and stereotype her, and the husband's support for her, that she actually, you know, was able to achieve so much, because she was never given, put into that pigeonhole and say that you cannot do this. As fathers, we must always unleash and unlock the potential of our children so that they can achieve things that perhaps we could not achieve. And that actually goes a long way towards promoting gender equality. And let me just end with this thing that we have always learned in our workshops. that the best gift for fathers, that fathers can give to their children, is actually to love the mothers and to respect the mothers. That is the best gift. And when they do that, everybody thrive. The family thrive, and gender equality will also thrive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Jason. So now we've done all 5. I've got 20 minutes on the clock to complete this. So I'll do the questions that I kicked off first, and then I'll open it to the floor. If you can give brief answers, because you've had your 15-minute presentation, so that we can allow for questions from the floor. So for the first one, Puan Khadijah, I think the question I asked was, which comes first, sustainability comes first or equality comes first? And how do you link that with DFI, and how do they assess it?
Which one comes first, equality or sustainability? Because as I defined just now, to me, sustainability is about surviving, right? So in order for us to be sustainable, to continue to survive, then it has to start with the equality first. Yeah, so that's my take on that. And I think there's also a question just now you posed on the culture, right? And I think the decision-making process will be influenced by the culture. However, the policymakers still have to kickstart with the appropriate policy first. Then awareness will come in, and at the end of the day, I think culture now kind of got mixed up because of the internet. The world is getting smaller. So people will have, especially the young generation, will have different expectations because of the exposure that they have.
Thank you. Chair Azizi, the question I think I had was, you had 2 or 3 concentrated industries where women were quite active. And if we are going to see sustainability and equality more prevalent, how do we promote, or not how, should women be in more industries, or is it just adequate for them to be in the existing industries but given more opportunities in those existing industries?
Thank you. I think that it has to be encompasses. It has to be all the industries, all the field of works. They have to get involved. I think gone are the days that, as I said just now, the jobs are stereotyping. That these jobs are men or more suited for male, and this is for female. I think gone are those days, because if you look right now, I think the brain power, everything is kind of like evolved around technology. You don't really need people with muscular, to do certain jobs. You are all done through the technology, and this technology basically facilitates. And what comes, with the technology, of course, your brain power. So, in my opinion, it has to be every job. We are talking about gender equality, and it has to be every job.
So how does, what's the role of DFI in this?
I think that the DFI, if you look at our mandate, is more like developing the industries. Okay, this is where basically, we can encourage, entrepreneurs from both sides, the women entrepreneurs as well as the men entrepreneurs, to kind of like boost the knowledge, and also kind of like a progress towards a betterment in the industries, in the business field, business world, which I think in the past was, you're talking about the business in the past also dominated mainly by the men. So this is opportunities for DFIs as well, to kind of like groom women entrepreneurs.
Thank you. I actually asked Tan Sri Jamila a question on how can these benchmarks be implemented, and what may the roadblocks be, and she gave us a recorded answer.
Can model against for aspired state in Malaysia. Well, for me, I'm really taken and a firm believer in what is called the donut economic model by Kate Rayworth. The model for me makes so much sense today because unlike other economic models that are really unsustainable, looking at, for example, GDP, that's not a good measure of development. Then you have circular economy, which is good, but not enough. So donut economics takes it one step further. It's circular economy plus, I always say. First of all, the donor economic model is different because it acknowledges that we need to be in a safe space for humanity to thrive. And this means taking a very close look and ensuring that the two rings, or rather the limits of the donut economics, you can imagine it's a donut. The outer ring is our ecological ceiling, our planetary boundaries. How do we make sure that we don't violate that too much and we don't transgress the planetary boundaries too much? While the inner ring is actually our social floor, our social boundaries, that we need to also ensure we get people into that safe space by meeting some of the social parameters and indicators in that boundary. So if we can try not to overshoot the ecological boundary, protect the social boundary, then we're in that safe space for humanity. And I am quite certain in doing so, our economy will thrive.
Thank you. Dr. Kavita, I had the question of empowerment, or where are we imposing a Western form of empowerment onto an Eastern version of empowerment, and the whole topic of tokenism. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question, Faris. I think when we talk about westernized empowerment or westernized culture, we have adopted many things from Western, must be, right? And every one of us is an evidence of carrying those Western culture in us, because the way that things evolve today, somehow rather the Western or the Eastern get mixed up in the culture and the society being developed. So for that matter, empowerment is something that I would strongly believe that it should start from an individual and should not, because it is seen in a very different way of a culture to culture or society to society, and it should not be a standardized term for everyone. And it should be something that develop instantly from their inner self. So it is about self-engineering very much, to bring the empowerment to people, and how do you actually cultivate the empowerment to other people. So, and that is also not right or wrong about it, because I think it is about what is appropriate for us. Because there are so many culture that is influencing us. I think Puan Khadija mentioned about internet. The way that internet has evolved, and all of us has been tweaked into that culture in a very different way, and even can be a negative impact, contributing to the economy badly. I'm talking about the social media effect here. And at the same time, I want to see that how that internet or the evolvement of technology can be used as an advantage to build ourselves and to be more relevant in the industry, like what Jazzy is saying. So yeah, that's bad.
So then I naturally go to Jason on, so much has been spoken on sustainability in the industry, yet how do we create sustainability at home while creating sustainability in the industry, in ensuring our relationships are stable at home, in us trying to be front and center, equal and on par. Sometimes that's at the expense of our relationships, at the expense of our children left at home. I can safely say I have enough relatives where both the husband and wife are high-flying doctors, and the children live with their grandparents, and they live on Starbucks and McDonald's. They get $50 a day as pocket money, and that happens in my home. And so whilst the husband and wife are equal partners, and they are front and center in the agenda of gender equality, the home suffers. And not the home suffers, the next generation's future suffers. How do we ensure that that is not impacted while my generation, our generation, and in this room are fighting for the equality, or are we doing that at the expense of the next generations?
Yeah, certainly I think it starts with small steps. We can dream big, but we have to start small sometimes. So this is, in a way, when you look at the family, whatever that is taught within the family, the children, the next generation, if they are taught to respect the other gender, and they are taught that they have been treated equally, like the daughter has been treated equally like the son. So therefore, whether you are a girl or a boy in a family, you are a daughter or son, you are given equal opportunities, equal rights, equal responsibilities. And when they grow up, this is a generation that will remember, my father say that this is what it is. We are not put in a box, there are no limitations. I am as good as my brother, or my brother is as good as me. And that already sets the whole mindset to basically a transformation of a mindset that will go towards that. And it is also a very important thing, especially for men to play their part, really to scale up. Because so far, there are no countries in the world which has statistics showing that the men in that particular country has equal, no pay, unpaid care work hours equal to the women. It's always the women that is higher, So Malaysia is no different. But there is an improvement, there is an increase. But if more men are beginning to have the change of mindset that they need to do their part, then this will be forthcoming in terms that they will generate more family stability. At the same time, we are also promoting programs like resilience for men, basically, because the mental health issue is now a major issue, because as you know, pandemic, lockdown and all that causes a lot of stress, and then you spend too much time in the family with each other, sometimes also a lot of stress. We can be keluarga Malaysia, but sometimes we will fight and argue, but let's remain civil and keep it there, and we still, at the end of the day, we are still family, right? And family don't abandon one another. So that is something that's very important. So so long as we keep that in mind, and men play their part, providing that kind of leadership and that kind of responsibility and involvement in the children's and the family's life, then it will create a strong family. Strong family will create a strong community. Strong community will create a strong nation in a very sustainable way. Thank you.
This morning, someone sent me the following. Before I open it to the floor, hard times creates strong men. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. So on that note, can I open the floor to questions? Anyone for questions? Please go for it, this one there.
Hi, I'm Hafiza. Okay, I'm just going to keep it short. Quote from the Statistical Global Gender Gap Index score, for which equality for civil work in Malaysia in 2021 is 0.75. Talking about meritocracy, as the panelists touched base just now, what's your thoughts on the salary transparency if we ever going to do that in Malaysia?
So who's that question to?
Whoever the panelists wanted to.
So statistics, Encik Azizi?
Yeah, actually that's my first question. Just a second. Second question. Just wondering, what is for panelists, like you guys are already in a leadership position. I'm sure you have some sort of hiring decision already at this point of time, right? What is the process thought behind the hiring managerial position? Hiring. Yes, hiring managerial position. Because we know that we are not denied, as a women are not denied to participate in any industries that we like. But it's left unspoken because the decision of hiring left to the leadership, right? So is there any possibility that the thoughts of women having domestic responsibility also affect the hiring position for managerial level?
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
the first one, can I get Encik Azizi to answer, and the second one, Puan Khadijah to answer?
Okay, thank you for the question. When you talk about meritocracy, you have to actually put aside, all the parameters, that involved in meritocracy. You cannot look at the gender, you cannot look at the age, you cannot look at the race, purely based on the merit. Whether the person is capable, the person has the competency, the person can deliver whatever expected out of the job. I think that is the true spirit of meritocracy. So if in any organization, if they say that they practice meritocracy, but yet they're still like putting certain quotas, certain parameters, I don't think they can claim that they have actually practiced meritocracy.
Well, but Encik Azizi, you must admit some banks in DFI are just for a certain race.
I think
That isn't exactly meritocracy, is it? Even some GLCs, the boards and the management are completely for one race, and hence so much of cynicism towards GLCs. Number three, when they select chairmen and CEOs of GLCs particularly, there isn't competition. I know you, you know me, I know the minister, I know they get appointed. I mean, some of them are very, very good. However, their caliber is reduced by the fact that they were not put out there to be in competition with 3 or 4 candidates, as you would like if I were to go in a private sector for a position, I would need to actually compete with 3 or 4 candidates. The best man or woman wins. So, the question.
No, I totally agree with your observations. And I had the opportunity basically to work in one of the multinationals in the past, and we talked about meritocracy. This was way back in 1980s. We already kind of like practice meritocracy, and that company actually really practice it. We can, we put people, the leaders, the women at the leaders position. Yeah. But unfortunately in Malaysia, there are a lot of other factors, that also influence, the decision, as what Fairuz mentioned, especially among the GLCs. Because you have to look, who are the behind, all these organizations. And element of favoritism still exists in Malaysia. I think that's a reality. Yeah. Who's who is very important in Malaysia. But I think this is, I hope, that as I mentioned during my talk just now, this culture, has to change. And I think it's getting better now, especially we are having more and more the generations after the baby boomers. They are more open. They are more flexible. I think they are more, what I call it, matured in a certain extent. So the process, I think, it will not be something can happen immediately. It will take a long time before we can change this. But I really hope, that one day, we will come to that level, and we are basically counting on all these younger generations, to make that changes. For people like, our generation, it's a bit tough, right now to make that changes. But I think you guys, especially the young generation, this is the time that we have to make the change.
Okay. Hiring decisions.
Hiring decision, okay. I think if you look at the industries, banks especially, they are actively hiring. Because if you to compare banks with hospitality or tourism, they're not as badly as affected. Yeah, so they're actively hiring. And of course, the hiring will be based on competency and capabilities. Yeah. So the advantage is that is why we have this kind of awareness where we need to put more women on the decision-making roles. So if they were involved, if they're involved in the interview, or if they need to make that decision on hiring, so they, at least, they don't have, we can address this unconscious bias. Yeah. So that's the importance of having the involvement of the women in the decision-making process in any organization.
Thank you. Any other questions? Carry on. Yeah. Question, yeah? Yeah, thank you.
This can be for whoever wishes to answer. So it was mentioned that equality should not be standardized. So, could this perhaps be a dangerous sentiment because it could be used as an excuse to prevent progression simply because a society or a culture does not agree that a certain thing constitutes as inequality does not make it so? In Saudi Arabia, many were in agreement that it was unsafe or ill advised for a woman to drive or become a judge. In Iran, many of the population agree that headscarves should be forced. In Malaysia, many of the population are in agreement of the application of Sharia principles and family law, which make it difficult for women to get divorced. So how can we be respectful and mindful of the nation's unique culture and religious beliefs while still not tiptoeing around the toxic and sexist elements that culture may be protecting?
Anyone for that? Equality shouldn't be standardized.
Maybe I just comment a bit. I think culture is something that you cannot reconcile and you cannot compromise. Especially, we cannot run away from the fact that culture has some value or association with religion. Yeah, and when it comes to religion, especially, for example, you take in Malaysia, with the multi-ethnics, multi-religion, it will be very tough. You take a simple, for example, the same-sex marriage, for example, highly being promoted in the Western countries. We're talking about equality, but I don't think it will happen in Malaysia, because of the religion sentiment and so forth. So I think this is where what I call it, the engagement, with the stakeholders will play a part. You may not get 100% what you want if you were to compare against the Western countries, for example, but there should be some similarities, that can tolerate, the culture differences.
Let me just add on to that, Intiaz. I think when you're talking about equality standardization, I think we must focus on what is appropriate to be adopted, especially when you're looking at the sustainability development goals to map it with that. Talking about the culture and the society, which we have actually spoken about it earlier, culture is something that has been there for decades. And if you want to change a culture, it needs a narrative change in mind and people's perspective. And that's going to be very difficult. It's going to take a long, long way to do that. But it all starts from us and also the policy makers, definitely. And comparing that from one country to another, there are very relevant policies and practices and procedures are already in place to look into certain level of standardization which is appropriate for equality. So that's my point.
One last question before we close?
Good afternoon, and I would like to give a hearty thank you to the gentleman who dared to come to this and support this event. My question is actually to any of the panel members. I understand that whilst we talk about the system, the support system and all that, but one thing interesting that when we look at the labour participation rate in Malaysia compared to more advanced countries, or even to our neighbours like Vietnam and all that, is that we seem to have plateaued, right? And I have this theory is because the context of work is pretty much inflexible in Malaysia. When women go up in the labour workforce and due to some life events like having children or having to care for an elderly parent, they exit the workforce and they're never to see again. They never make it back to the workforce. And I think this is something that we as maybe development banks or even any S&M, any employer should think about that, because women, is a fact that women have higher life expectancy than men.
Sure.
Right?
And so the question being?
So the question is, what do you think would be a good systemic intervention to change the context of work today in Malaysia about women
Jason?
not checking out from employment entirely, and how do we make them come back to the workforce and contribute to the economy?
Sure. If you were advising, Jason, if the ministries, the policymakers, what would be the best, not best, but most encouraged interventions to ensure women who exit do not exit permanently?
Yeah, I think it is very much a question of the mindset, the changing of the challenging of the usual stereotypes. And definitely in the sense, I think when we talk about gender equality, it must not be seen as a zero-sum game, where if women are given that kind of equality, therefore they're going to take away 50% of the men's piece of cake. Well, the other question to ask is also, was it the man's piece of cake in the first place? There is always a business case for diversity and gender equality, because why are more directors, why is the policy now for more women directors to be placed on the board of a lot of companies? Up to about now, what's that, 30%? Yeah. Because the business case for that is that a diverse board provides a diverse opinion, and usually it is more creative, more innovative, and it is more representative of a lot of things. So, in fact, when there are women joining into the thing, it actually increases the cake. The cake gets bigger. Because the company will probably end up doing much better. So in that sense, I think if we handle that part, and then the men play the part in encouraging the women in terms of the whatever work that they need to do at home, then a lot of women, I think, can actually, those who are not, has quit the workforce may return to the workforce. Because now they are in a way liberated from a lot of the perceived responsibilities at home, because some of it can be taken by the husband. So on the whole, I think it will be a net gain, and that will be definitely a plus towards sustainability.
Hadija?
Yeah, if I can just a thought. I thought it was interesting when the first woman of bank and the first woman bank was established in America. Could it be the answer to make sure that only women will understand women, and having one organization, a DFI for women, can understand what are the problems that we face, and therefore we can actually retain some of the women workforce.
I'll
Right,
close with,
Khairul, sorry, I just wanted to add to the point. I think it's a very interesting question from the Malaysian context, and I would like to share my experience. Being the cybersecurity professional in our country, we have very limited women who actually involve themselves as a cybersecurity professional. And there has been a great demand. By year 2020, we were required to have about 10,000 cybersecurity professionals in our country, but unfortunately, we were not able to meet the number. So with the with the due respect, and also the support from the government that we got, we actually bring back those women who exited the career, right? With the support of the ministry, we bring them back. They actually took a short break, like you said, ma'am. In fact, they have got children, they've got parents, ill parents and something like that. And we make them to come back. Maybe they were a break about 5 years or 6 years. It does not matter. As long as you still have your skill, we are here to help you to polish, and we bring them back. We give them the relevant certification and build them back, upskill them back, and put them in the industry again. So that actually shows the demand. When there is a demand, the supply is definitely needed. And if the women are ready to grab the opportunity, I'm going back to my same point, everyone is here to support. Thank you.
My final question to all panelists before we close is brief answers, please. If there is one pet policy change you would like to see in Malaysia to making a better Malaysia, what would that be? Puan Khadijah.
Okay, I keep on mentioning about DFI, Bank for Women. Is it possible to have one in Malaysia? A bold move for the country.
Jason?
Well, we all know that it is quite fashionable to have premarital courses, for those couples who want to get married. So if there's one policy change, then I hope that the government can make it compulsory, mandatory, that for all the men who want to get married, undergo the fathering workshop conducted by Better Dads Malaysia.
Chair Azizi.
Okay, maybe I come from the subtle point, from the employment perspective. I think we should get rid of the gender declaration. Whether you're male or female. Sometimes in the form you have to put down, whether you're male or female. What's the point? You're talking about meritocracy. You're talking about equality. Why should you, fill out that form saying that I'm a female, I'm a male? I think we should get rid of those things.
Fantastic. And Dr. Kavita.
I like that point, Azizi. Actually, policies are deterring. So blend yourself, and whatever policy that we have in our country, you should be able to make it. So, thank you.
So I'll close with this one poem which I truly, truly like. It's by James Grangs on freedom. They tell me freedom is never free. I know that, more than most realize. Freedom costs us more than we should have to give. Freedom cost us blood. It cost us the lives of our fathers, our sons, our brothers. But while freedom is never free, remember, it has been bought at great price, and so is a thing of great value. We must defend it from those who would take it away. The defense of our freedoms will cost us more than we wish to pay, but we must pay to defend. For if we try to make freedom free, we forget true freedom is never free. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Firoz, and all the extraordinary 5 speakers for the discussion and sharing session for today. Thank you so much. And I would like to invite Encik Muhammad Hilaluddin Abdul Syukur, the Vice Chairman of Adfim and also the CEO of Pernas, to provide a token of appreciation to the 4 panelists for today, including our moderator for today, Puan Khatijah Iskandar, Encik Azizi Mustafa, Ms. Kavita Muti, Encik Jason Leong, and also our moderator for today, Encik Feiruz. So I would like to invite Encik Muhammad Hilal to provide a token for Puan Khatijah Iskandar. And then to Encik Jason Leong, to Encik Azizi Mustafa, to Ms. Kavita Muti, and our one and only moderator for today, Ms. Firoz. Okay, once again, thank you to Cik Muhammad Hilal and to all the 4 speakers and also our moderator for today. So you may proceed to the seats down there. And before we end this summit, I would like to invite our Secretary General, Encik Muhammad Prasad Hanif, for a closing speech. Please welcome.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and a very good evening. It's been a very long day, hasn't it? I have a story to share with you. I think it was a few months ago. I was sitting and having coffee. And as I was having coffee, I saw my wife. She was there doing her stuff. And I called her over, said, Sheila, why don't you come and sit beside me? I'm like, she was looking at me funny. And anyway, she decided to oblige me and came, sat beside me. And she said, why? And I looked at her and I said, coffee is always sweeter when you're closer to me. Ada banyak lagi pick up line like this. Follow my Facebook. So what I wanted to, the story is essentially for us to note that in this journey of gender equality and sustainability, it is always sweeter when we walk together, essentially. So the entire day's event today, some of you might have come in here and noticed it's a very grand hall. Some of you might have actually noticed we had a blackout today. Some of you might have actually been in the hall and didn't even notice that we had a blackout. So could have happened that way as well. And some of you might still be figuring out what you had for lunch. I still don't know what I had for my lunch. I couldn't figure out whether it was kway teow or mee goreng or it's something in between, right? So, despite all that, we have to ask ourselves the purpose of why we organize this event today, right? And that's the reason why it's actually an unplanned script. So that's the reason why I'm on stage today. With this event today, we don't aim to start a revolution tomorrow. Or is everybody ready to do a revolution after listening to Dr. Kavita just now? I don't know. So we're not going to start a revolution tomorrow, or we're not going to be changing the entire world tomorrow. But what we intended to achieve today is to create enablers. There's 100 of us today, 100 more actually. We invited 100 people. We had about 120 seats today. So that's why you're seeing actually extra seats empty. We have over 100 enablers today that have actually sat down and listened to various aspects of the topic on gender equality. We talked about sustainability, and we also heard about Chandra Nair talking about where quotas and numbers of measurement doesn't necessarily account for the cost behind assigning those numbers. We talked about the presence of women in leadership. We talked about corruption and gender equality as well. We talked about integrity to a certain extent and gender equality as well. There's a whole broad of subjects that we talked about today. And it does not, gender equality does not stand alone. It actually has a lot of impact from many other aspects of areas as well. So what we wanted to do today was essentially to give you the necessary knowledge to trigger that thought process. And if that thought process today has been triggered among these 100 enablers, you can go back and make a change within your circle of influence. We don't expect you to go out there and change the entire world. We don't expect you to go out there and start picketing in front of Parliament tomorrow. Unless, of course, if you want to do that, it's a free country, right? Go ahead. Recorded blah, Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that you're enablers, and whatever you've taken today, go back and try to see how you can enable one small step towards gender equality. And if each and every one of us put in 0.01% at least, that 0.01% times 100 is already 0.1%. And if that has more, that impacts other lives, you're going to have an exponential movement. And that's what we expect to achieve today, right? So I hope that this entire day, right, despite the fact that you don't know what you had for lunch, despite the blackout, right, despite all that, you can take back all the necessary knowledge that we have actually shared in front of you, all the experts that have shared their insights, and try to influence within your circle, whether it be at work. And we even brought here Mr. Jason because we know that some of us have actually influence within our family, right? My wife, I'm afraid of heights. My wife successfully convinced me to jump out of an airplane. That's how powerful each and every one of you can be. I'm afraid of heights, right? And she actually successfully convinced me to do skydiving, right? And I did it, right? And this one time, and I'm never ever going to do that again, right? But that's another point. But I'm saying that with this insights that you have gained, go back, become an enabler, change whoever you can change. Change your environment, change the people you connect with, change your subordinates, have an impact on your sons, have an impact on your husband, have an impact on your wife at least. I mean, for the men who are here today. So I know, it's difficult to influence wives, but then again, be a partner. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to say is today is a very powerful day. I want everyone today to go back and become enablers. Can we do that? Yes. Can we do that? Okay, a little bit of energy at the end of the day. Okay, well, I would like to thank each and every one of you for spending the entire day today. And we hope that we can organize more, insightful forums like today. And as you might have observed, we don't censor anyone. We actually do talk about everything, frankly, and out there as well, so that we get educated and we get enlightened. Now, I would like to seek your humblest apologies for any of the blackouts and all the imperfections that might have occurred today. And I would like to extend my deepest and sincerest appreciation to all the Adfim member institutions who sponsored the event today, specifically to Sabah Credit Corporation, Bank Rakyat, Agrobank, Perbadanan Nasional Berhad, MIDF, and Perbadanan Usahawan Nasional Berhad for sponsoring the event today and making it happen. And not only did they sponsor by financially, they even actually helped us to organize this. You see the goodie bags, and then you see a lot of their staffs also helping us with organizing the event. So this is the amount of support DFIs are giving to the gender equality goal. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to also thank my entire team who tirelessly worked 3 or 4 days until one of them actually collapsed today, so she went back home, right? So they worked tirelessly to make today happen as well. Thank you very much for my entire team. And thank you for the technical team. They were very courteous despite my outbursts on their technical competencies, right? So thank you for the technical team as well for bearing with us. Thank you very much for everyone who's here. I hope there's, we can meet again in the future and do keep in touch with us so that you will know more of our programs in the future. Thank you very much. Wabillahi taufiq wa Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Encik Muhammad Prasad Hanif, our Secretary General of Adfim, for the closing speech. And I would like to ask you for remain on the stage, Encik Muhammad Prasad. Because before we close, I would like to invite once again Encik Muhammad Hilaluddin Abdul Syukur to receive a token of appreciation from Adfim. Okay, thank you so much once again to Encik Hilal and also Mr. Prasad. And with that, we have come to an end of the summit. And on behalf of Adfim, I would like to humbly thank everyone for joining the Adfim Women's Summit 2022. Also, not forgetting to all the sponsors for contributing to the success of this event. We thank you and we appreciate all of your efforts. So, Assalamualaikum and see you again.